The Forester has been updated for 2025, and while this car might push 177 grand, apparently you can have it for a lot less. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Forester lineup has been updated for 2025, which now ushers in a new flagship, which is this model. Now, over the other models in the lineup, there are a few certain niceties that you get exclusive with this flagship model. For example, you now get full LED headlights up here, replete with what's known as steering responsive headlights, or SRH, where the headlights will now swivel according to the steering input. This is a feature that we first saw from the Subaru XV, and now it's finally made it onto this facelifted Forester, and I do think that that is a pretty good feature. On top of that, these headlights are also with automatic high beam with LED indicators here, and now the fog lights are finally LED as well. The daytime running lights also take up this signature here, as opposed to illuminating the fog lights down there. That's certainly nice to see. On top of that, we also get a little bit more chrome trim here, and the very large hexagonal Subaru grille is now done up in gloss black, which I think does make this car look a little bit better, although admittedly, this car is starting to show its age. And that is most evident down the side, because the Forester's profile hasn't really changed much over the last couple of generations. This car looks more like a lifted station wagon or lifted estate car, as opposed to a traditional SUV. Now, some may like that and some may not, but I think that it does look decent now, especially with the updated rolling stock for this facelift model. Now, while the size remains a similar 18 inches like what we saw from the previous Forester that we reviewed, which had the GT alloy wheels, these have a diamond cut finish to the front, which makes it look a little bit snazzier, and they're wrapped in Bridgestone Dweller HP Sport tires, which are suitably high performance tires for this all-wheel drive vehicle. All of this certainly works towards making this a much more livable car on the road. Now, aside from that, life on the side is again very similar to what we've seen from other Foresters before. You get functional roof rails, you get chrome trim around the windows, you also get proper induction type door handles on both front doors to lock and unlock the car, and you get a little bit of contrast plating down on the bottom in order to sort of break up the monotony here. However, this model still suffers from the same issue that we raised from our previous review of the Forester, which is the fact that this angle here seems to make the car look very bulky. Now, you may like it or you may not, but that is a matter of opinion. The back of the Forester is once again a matter of broadly similar, but the changes or the devil is in the details. So for example, down here, you get a little bit more of that contrast plating in order to break up the visual monotony back here. We also get LED taillights with LED brake lights, but not indicators or reverse lights. But more importantly, the biggest fix for this particular flagship model is the fact that you now get a powered tailgate. Now, opening that tailgate will reveal a pretty good amount of space back here, certainly large enough for 5 people's worth of luggage, even for a weekend getaway. On top of that, underneath this floor, you will find a pretty decent amount of space as well, even though there is actually a spare tire that lives underneath that, which means that this is a decently practical car. And of course, if you need even more space, you can fold the rear seats 60-40 for added practicality, and more importantly, when those seats fold, it is completely flat, which means that if you are trying to furnish a small studio apartment, you should have plenty of room in here for all the crap you might need. Folding the rear seats is pretty easy because there are actually switches on either side of this boot in order to release the backrest. There are also hooks and a 12-volt socket in order to make life a little bit easier. And overall, I do think the back end of this car is very well designed and very well packaged in order to fit family needs. Now, the interior of the Forester, although this is now the flagship model, is broadly similar to what we've seen from other Forester models before. So we've got a couple of electric front seats. There is this sort of supervision display up here. There are a couple of nice dials, another digital screen in the middle, and a relatively small head unit, which weirdly is not only small, but also doesn't seem to offer wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You need a wire. However, in terms of the overall quality, there is one area that is very hard to fault with Subaru, because these cars are built to an incredibly fastidious degree. Nothing in this car, for example, squeaks or rattles. everything feels very solidly built. All the materials used are nice and forgiving. There's plenty of contrast stitching about the place. And overall, I will say that if you're the kind of person who's really into really good build quality, then you'd really appreciate the interior of this Forester. The material choices in this car have also been kind of upgraded somewhat, because in addition to all the soft touch material, you get more leather on the door cards, more contrast stitching, and everything that you touch and feel feels relatively forgiving and relatively hard wearing. Now that brings me on to the matter of the screens. So the Supervision cluster up here, as well as the digital instrument display in between the dials in the middle here, while they are relatively small by today's standards, I will grant you that much, they are very easy to use. All the information is displayed in a very logical kind of way, and so you get all the information that you need at a glance. It's always nice to see. Now this central screen, however, is slightly less successful, because while it operates very well and the pixel density and overall graphics in this are pretty much okay, I do find that because it's kind of small and also because of the angle of the thing, it tends to reflect a lot of glare to the driver, especially when you're driving in the middle of the day. That said, however, because there are some physical knobs and physical buttons here to control major functionality, I'm willing rather to forgive it of quite a few sins, because as far as I'm concerned, this works well. It might not win much in terms of showroom appeal, but because it works well, that's fine. The same goes for the dials down here. Now, all of the HVAC controls live here on proper knobs with proper switches, and everything just feels very nice to use. And all of this manipulates displays that are shown up here on the Supervision cluster, negating the need for a secondary set of displays here, or worse still, integrating it into the head unit. So that's always nice to see. Further down, you get buttons for your surround view camera, your electric parking brake, as well as this, which is your X mode selector. Now, talking about the drive modes in this car, there are two ways to manipulate them. Up here, you have intelligent and sharp modes for intelligent driving or more spirited driving, because sharp is sport in Subaru speak. But down here, you have the X mode toggle, which gives you the option of using snow, dirt, or deep snow and mud, or just push it down for normal. One of the main selling points of a Subaru is its symmetrical all-wheel drive system, and this X mode switch here allows you to fully utilize that should you actually be the sort of person to drive off-road on a regular basis. Now, while again this car might look like a jacked up estate car, you do not screw around with Subaru X mode, because the symmetrical all-wheel drive and X mode capabilities in Subarus are pretty impressive no matter how you slice it. What is also impressive is actually the practicality in this car, because you get decently sized spaces here in the glove box as well as on the door bins, big enough for a 1.5 litre size bottle. You get a little bit of cubby storage here, as well as a couple of cup holders here, as well as a pretty decently sized center console bin. You also get a glasses or sunglasses holder up here, which is always nice to see, and the sun visors, although very large themselves, also come with an extension here to further block out the sun if you have it in this position, and that's always nice to see. Ergonomics in this car also pretty good, with this steering wheel, for example, able to adjust for both reach and rake, which is always helpful. And while these seats are also very adjustable with angle adjustment, height adjustment, and backrest adjustment, unfortunately there is no lumbar and there is also no memory. These are two things I find quite disappointing, given the fact this car's recommended retail price is well over 170,000 ringgit. Now, the rear accommodations of the Subaru Forester are very generous. As you can see, I have a good amount of knee room and a good amount of headroom, despite that front seats being set up in my driving position, about 170 centimeters. Material quality back here is also just as pleasant as it is in the front, with lots of soft touch materials being used about the place, more of that double stitching and lots of leatherette used about here. And of course, you still get the same JBL speakers that we saw in the front, which means that, again, life back here doesn't feel too bad as a passenger. On top of that, because the front seats are set up quite high, there is plenty of space to tuck in my feet underneath the seat in front of me, and even the center seat here is relatively generous, because you have a decent amount of space for feet, and the footwells themselves are quite large, which means that you can just straddle the transmission tunnel in this car without too much issue. On top of that, there are a couple of USB-A ports here. There are a couple of crotch coolers, which is decent. Practicality is very well accommodated, because you have 3 pockets behind the front seats, including one just nice for your phone. There's decently sized door bins, big enough for a litre size bottle, smaller pockets up here, and you also have a deployable center armrest with a couple of cup holders. Now, one thing that I would like to point out in this car is if you do have a bulky rear-facing child seat, finding the tethers for them might be a little bit more difficult than you might necessarily expect, because they're not really very clearly labeled on this car, although the doors do open wide enough for you to fit a bulky rear-facing child seat without too much issue. And because of the relatively long wheelbase, you do have a decent amount of clearance before it eventually rubs up on the backs of the front seats. The other thing I'd like to point out is the fact the glass house in this car is quite large, which means that if you have a child in a child seat here, they should have a pretty good view out. But if you have an infant, you will need to tint these windows in order to prevent them from getting too much exposure to UV rays. Aside from that though, I do think the rear half accommodation in this car is pretty good and pretty generous, and because of the way the seats are set up, I, even as an adult, have a pretty good view out, and overall this does seem quite pleasant. Now, the other two selling points of a Subaru are its Boxer flat 4 engine as well as the EyeSight advanced driver assist features. Now, these two things are things that are a bit of a hit and miss, as we'll discuss back in the driver's seat. Now, driving the Forester is a surprisingly positive experience. Surprising, perhaps, because this is obviously not a brand new car, at least it doesn't sit on a brand new platform, and so your expectations might not be all that high. But one thing about Subaru is that they appear to be driven primarily by engineering, and so sat here, the first thing that really jumps out at you is just how well engineered this car is. There is not a squeak, not a rattle, no nothing. This car feels solid, like it's hewn from granite, and that is something that we've seen from other Subaru models before. And that's just one of those prevailing things about a Subaru. BMWs, for example, drive very well, Mercedes-Benzes are very comfortable, Audis are very quiet, and Subarus are just very well engineered. Now, being sat here, one of the immediate things that stand out to you is the fact that obviously this car has not been designed to be a crossover. Despite the fact that it looks like a jumped up estate, this is perhaps the least crossover-y of all the SUVs that money can currently buy within the market, simply because when you're sat here, you have an excellent view out. The glass house on this car is absolutely massive, which means that you have a very good view out regardless of which direction you might be looking at. And because this car invites you to sit a little bit higher than you may normally would in a car like this, it also means that, again, you have this relatively commanding driving position, which makes you, again, feel very secure. Now, of course, power in this car comes from that 2-litre 4-cylinder Boxer engine that I've mentioned before. This is, of course, another hallmark of Subaru. And the progress in this car is leisurely. It doesn't surge off the line with the sort of urgency that you get out of a turbocharged powertrain. It doesn't sort of kick you in the backside the way some electrified cars do. Instead, it just sort of picks up and goes with a sort of pace that, again, you'd expect from a mid-size family SUV. It's not slow, but it's not fast. It is good enough, and it is exactly what you'd expect, again, from a vehicle like this. This is kind of where your expectations ought to be. But what I think really surprises me every time I drive a Forester especially is the fact that even though this is a relatively large, relatively tall car, it changes direction with a sort of agility that you just do not expect within this category. Now, for starters, this car obviously benefits from having the symmetrical all-wheel drive system as well as the X mode system if you do find yourself driving on slightly more challenging terrain. But for the most part, if you're just driving about in town, you will find that this car changes direction with a sort of immediacy that you just don't expect. It feels, in fact, about as urgent as you would get out of, say, a Mazda CX-5, while not really having the same sort of European-like suspension. This car still errs on the side of comfort, and so it isolates the cabin a little bit more. And of course, the fact that this car does come with symmetrical all-wheel drive, it means that in the corners, if you're really pushing hard, you will find that this car offers significantly more grip than quite literally anything else on the mass market. This is as a result of the symmetrical all-wheel drive being a permanent all-wheel drive system, unlike vehicles like, say, the Jayco J7, which is also a very accomplished off-roader, that is ultimately a part-time all-wheel drive system, which means that the rear wheels only really kick in when the car decides that you need that extra grip. Whereas in this, that grip is always there, whether you need it or not. Now, some of you may suggest that as a result of this permanent all-wheel drive system, this car must therefore be a lot more thirsty when it comes to fill-ups. But I can report that this car, if driven sedately, will return anywhere between 7 to 8.5 liters to the 100, at least if you're not driving, in stop-start traffic all the time, in which case you'll be expecting numbers around about 9. But in terms of, for example, motorway driving, if you're just doing, say, 110, 120, doing motorway miles with an open road in front of you, this car will comfortably do in like the mid-7s, which means that a full tank on this car will do about 700 kilometers between fill-ups, which I think is very impressive. On top of that, as we're sat at this traffic light now, this is also the first Subaru I've driven that offers automatic stop-start. And in addition to a stop-start system, it also has this stop-start timer, which shows you just how much fuel you save every time you stop. So according to this, I've had the car off using this system for about 18 minutes, and I've saved about 400 milliliters of fuel, which is great for me because I'm a nerd, but I think that for the average Joe, they're going to realize just how little fuel these systems actually save. Now, in addition to all of this, what I think is the icing on the cake is actually this car's safety systems. Now, the Subaru Forester comes with EyeSight, which is basically the Subaru moniker for all of their active safety features. Now, EyeSight essentially uses a couple of cameras mounted to the very top of the windscreen, which work as a pair of stereo cameras to be able to perceive the world around it. Now, as a result, this car offers things like adaptive cruise control with traffic jam assist, autonomous emergency braking with cyclist and pedestrian detection. It gives you lane centering, lane keep assist. It also has blind spot monitoring, a 360-degree camera, as well as rear cross-traffic alert. All very positive things to see within this segment. But the point that I'd like to touch on is the fact that the EyeSight system in this car appears to be one of the best calibrated ADAS systems within the mass market space. Mazda's radar-guided cruise control and Mazda, whatever the hell they call their safety systems, are about as good. The Korean marks are also about as good, but I think that Subaru has a little bit more polish in terms of things like the way the car reacts to the world around it. It doesn't jump on the brakes, nor does it slam on the accelerator when the road in front clears up. Instead, it feels very natural. And one of the things that this car offers that I have not yet seen from any other brand is the ability to tailor how the car slows down and accelerates. You can have it in a more gentle way, you can have it in a more aggressive way. That depends entirely on you. And so having that degree of granular control really does set the Subaru Forester apart. Additionally, for July and August, you can drive away with a brand new Subaru Forester with more than 20,000 ringgit savings, including a 6-year comprehensive warranty as well as 5-year comprehensive service package, making this perhaps the best possible time to buy a brand new Subaru Forester. Of course, if you're the kind of person that does motorway miles all day long, then you may be better served by vehicles like the Mazda CX-5, especially in its turbo diesel guise, because that car basically sips fuel as you do long motorway runs, and it is also as well specified as this. And of course, if you want an entrant within this space that is perhaps slightly sharper to drive, there is also the Honda CR-V, which, despite its many failings, does come across as a very well-engineered, very well executed driver's car, if for whatever reason there is a consideration within that space. But if you ask me, one of the things that I love most about this car is that absolute sense of security, and that comes from the symmetrical all-wheel drive, permanent all-wheel drive system that you can only get in a Subaru Forester, and that is a mark of differentiation that you will struggle to find anywhere else within the segment. And that, to me, is what sets this car apart. In any case, that concludes our review of the 2025 Subaru Forester. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below, including the link to join our new WhatsApp channel. Thank you so much for watching. We will catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.